Yeah, so to add context to that, 3 years ago, I was in the biggest free fall, nosedive of my professional life. I had gone from founding what had been named as Europe's top tech startup, named by Forbes as one of the 5 CEOs to watch, won every award. Like, my award shelf was embarrassingly full, to fired and unemployed. Not only had I lost my company very suddenly and very quickly, I had lost my sense of identity, because I suspect, like many of you, you're driven to entrepreneurship and driven to be a founder by compulsion. It's kind of what you do. It's in your DNA. And so when I lost that company, I had a very unexpected and, yes, traumatic experience of grief. Grief for a company is not something I ever expected to experience. But I also had grief for, I know how egotistical this sounds, but I had grief for this lost, successful version of myself. The entrepreneur who was really nailing it had vanished. I kept seeing her pictures appear places, which just made me feel worse. And what was really interesting, and maybe the ecosystem that you work in is different, but the ecosystem that I was in Scotland, I wasn't invited to anything for a year. I think people thought failure was going to be catching, and so safest to stay very far away from me in case they caught my failure too. And that was actually a really isolating experience. But what was fascinating during that year of purgatory, where I did a lot of processing, analysis, blogging, drinking tea with other founders, is that there was a group of people, generally multiple founders, serial entrepreneurs, who'd kind of been through that process in one way, shape, or form. They'd come to learn what I came to learn, which is that actually this is a multi-business learning experience. There's a reason why investors, when they're due diligencing, ask you about what businesses you've done before, what failure you've experienced as a co-founding team, because I learned more from that experience than anything actually I've done before or since. And meeting with founders, I didn't have anything better to do, because not only was I unemployed, I had a restrictive clause that meant I couldn't do my next business for at least a year. So I didn't have anything better to do than drink tea with other entrepreneurs and write my blog. But that was an extraordinarily valuable thing to rebuild who I was, to rebuild what I wanted to do, and actually to understand what success really meant and what my why was. Because the company that crashed and burned was my 3rd startup, now on my 5th. But I went into that business. My very first startup was a typical consultancy. Me, my husband, a good, profitable business, growing like that. I was invited by the industry that I worked in to help start up their professional association, which was mainly based in the US. And there I met shiny Silicon Valley and New York entrepreneurs who thought businesses that go like that are rubbish. Like that is a lame-ass business. You are not a proper entrepreneur if you grow a business like that. It's like that, or go home. And I thought they were amazing. They were so cool. They were so swaggery. I wanted to be that kind of entrepreneur. I don't deny it. Like all of my mentors and models at that point were young, male, American-style Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. It's like, yes, that rocks. And what I didn't realize is that I was kind of completely embedding that version of what success looked like without really any context of applying that to who I am, who the people around me are, and what I was trying to achieve in life. So I went into that business with this really embedded sense that what success looked like was raising money, preferably lots of it. And people going, "Yay, you just had a great raise." What success was like was winning stuff, being on the front page of things. And I did achieve that. But actually, that wasn't very meaningful in any way, shape, or form. We had early clients because we were cool. People were talking about us. I was doing innovation. I was doing tech. And tech is sexy enough to get you a first phase of customers. When you're selling enterprise software, though, cool, sexy, and shiny tech is not enough to get you renewing contracts 3 years in, particularly when those clients or those teams have changed, their business models are under stress, you're not necessarily delivering the return on investment that you promised when you hadn't even built the tech. And I kind of learned the hard reality that there is more to a startup than raising money, being really good at pitching, and having a great idea. We did have functionally good technology. We really did. We had good IP, and we had functionally good technology. We didn't have product market fit. We didn't have that moment where the customer goes, "I need that. I need that so much, I'm willing to spend my own money on it if my darned financial director doesn't let me renew the contract." That's my goal for my current business. My single primary goal for this business is if my client's FD takes their money away, they'll get their own credit card out. Because for me, that is actually delivering something meaningful to the customer. In that third business, all my input, all the things that affected my decision-making were coming from investors, my board, the entrepreneurial ecosystem. They weren't coming day in, day out from my market and from my customer. If I had been as tuned in to what my clients had to say as to what my investors had to say, I would have realized they were worried about their jobs. Why are they worried about their jobs? Because they're in an industry that is breaking apart. High street retail, which is who our client base was broken. Major companies that had existed for 100 years were going out of business overnight. Tens of thousands of jobs were being lost. That was what our clients were worried about. Ironically, our tech could have helped with that kind of operational efficiency, but that wasn't where we were positioning it in the organization. We weren't clued in enough to that. Part of that was naivety, ego, distraction, but also part of that was just not being aware enough of how long it can take to actually get product market fit when you're on a slow sales cycle and long contracts. When that all fell apart, there were accelerants in that. At one point, I had a board that was bigger than the rest of my company combined, and those board members were angel investors who all had one vote. I had one vote, they had one vote. It became almost impossible for me to get anything done. And those things were baked in at the very beginning. The very first term sheet, when I just raised 200,000, set the terms for that. And I'll never do that again. So there were little things about actually, what is the goal of the board? What is the goal of the investors versus what is the goal of me and the goal of the company? You kind of naively assume they're the same thing first time around, and then later that you realize actually that they're really not. Unless you're specific and explicit and constantly communicating that stuff. When I founded Vistalworks, this current company, I'd worked together with my co-founding team for about 5 months. We'd just come together informally and worked full-time before we even made the decision of where we're going to start a company. And we sat there as a co-founding team going, okay, what does success look like for us? What will a good exit scenario look like? How long are we prepared to be in this for? What financial risks are we prepared to take? What is off limit? Houses are off limit. In the case of my co-founder that has children, school fees are off limits. We needed to understand our parameters before we even got into that. I never did any of that before. This, I feel, is my first grown-up business. And it's a reflection of age, and it's a reflection actually a little bit of the financial risks that I'm prepared to take. When I was in the Silicon Valley entrepreneur gung-ho, this is all so cool, it was an adrenaline ride. Every decision was a huge drama, roll of the dice, live or die, go big or go home. Which was fun, I can't deny it. But that is not good for your long-term physical or mental health. This business, I actually am quite drama avoiding wherever possible. It makes it easier to make the really difficult decisions when you need to. Little difficult decisions often, mostly about people, mostly about, do we bring this person in? Is this person working? Those kind of little decisions often, as opposed to huge existential crises periodically. Takes away the trauma and the stress. And I used to kind of work these crazy hours because I bought into that whole, if you're not working 110 hours, you're not serious. Now it's like, actually, that's a sign of founder inefficiency as well as everything else. I don't work 7 days a week anymore, mostly. I kind of spent that year coming up with a little process of what matters to me. What is a good idea? What is a business worth starting? What is a purpose worth having? And I got to the end of the year ready to go again. I was like, okay, right, I've gone through the process of blaming the board, blaming myself, hating everybody, hating nobody, being calm, being stressed. Now I'm just like through this process, I'm ready to go. But I didn't have an idea. I was like, I was working so hard, I was making lists. I was like, come to me, next great idea. I was like trying to come in the bath and try to come in my sleep. No idea. So I set up company number 4 to find the idea. I basically set up a collective for entrepreneurs who wanted to work on innovation projects or tech projects, but weren't ready to kind of completely quit the job or take the risk of being full-time entrepreneurs. I said, I'll find us ideas, I'll find us projects, you come join my team, and if we find a good one, we'll spin a company out. And that's actually what we did. Vistalworks, company number 5, span out of that process. And the co-founding team were the people that I had together working on the idea to start with. And we went through a very specific process, which starts with the pain, starts with the problem, starts with the customer. Who has got a really annoying, inefficient, costly pain? How big is that pain? Like, who else has that pain? I know some people do joy and delight and like beautiful things. I'm not very good at joy. I like pain and problems. I'm good at pain and problems, and so I always start. And I have complete respect for people who do joy and beautiful things and make lovely things that people want to buy. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. So I start with a problem surfacing exercise. I literally will get people in pairs or little teams going, just moaning, like moaning. I really hate it when, it's so annoying that, it really drives me mad that. By the time you've done that, you can do this with 5-year-olds and you can do this with 85-year-olds. By the time you've done that process for 15 minutes, you've got enough problems to keep you in founding business for the whole of the rest of your career. Which one you work on comes down to the rest of these points. Who else cares? Now, I get lots of problems surfaced, especially by kids, that relate to homework, that relate to better pens, pinker pens, shinier pens, all sorts of things. But actually, there's no business just in the problem and just in the idea. The business is in who else cares, and are there enough of them? And more importantly, who'll pay to solve the problem? In fact, who'll pay to just solve a little bit of the problem? If I can only make this 10% less bad, who will pay? And our current business, VistaWorks, basically, somebody brought the pain to us and said, we've got this really bad problem, and if you can prove to us that you think you might be able to fix it, we'll pay you for the first year to get started. Whoa, okay, right, pain, somebody cares, and they're gonna pay. Oh, beautiful. Only then, actually, do I worry about if we've got the skills or the remote concept of how we might solve the problem. I have a great deal of faith in tech and tech people. I figure if we can think of the pain, figure out the market, then, technically solving it is no big deal. There's people working on death, right? There's people working on Mars. I'm sure we can figure out something around risk scoring. I'm not worried about the skills particularly, although it does, for me, filter what businesses I'm prepared to work on. And finally, and only finally, comes love. First, then I have to imagine what the world looks like if we solve this problem. What does amazing, solved, happily ever after look like? And is that interesting enough for the customer and for me to spend 5 years working on it? I didn't go into VistaWorks in love with illicit trade or knowing anything about online financial crime. But actually, by the time I imagined a better world where people didn't get ripped off, I was really into this and I learned to love it. And so this company came from that. And every step of the way, we've looked at it as a validation exercise. Little steps instead of huge, big, dramatic rolls of the dice. So I wrote about some of these specific things, from product market fit to boards to what do you do next when you realize that, and things like what gets founders fired. I wrote them on my blog in a very specific year, my year of purgatory, so it comes from an angle, but feel free to check that out.
Thank you,
I guess.
So, as I told before, you can submit your questions on Slido if you wish to. I will kickstart with my own question.
Okay.
So, you were speaking about the term sheet and how you can mess everything up with it. How important actually you think is for the young entrepreneurs or your young startups to get the first term sheet right and to have everything done right?
I think I was really focused on the share cap table, and I'd had advice about that. I was very, very careful about the amount I gave away, what I structured as options versus shares. What I wasn't aware of was how important the board structure mattered. And because my mentors were US mentors, US boards work differently. The CEO usually controls the board in the US. Certainly in the UK, the board controlled the CEO. And I didn't understand that. So there were terms in my term sheet, and I know they're still around because I see them, which is basically gives the board the right to arbitrarily remove the CEO for anything: mental health, illness, irresponsibility, anything. And I know those term sheets still exist because somebody sent me one earlier this week going, is this normal? I'm going, yeah, unfortunately. I signed one. I'm not sure I'd sign it again, but then I'm in a different negotiating position to I was last time.
All right. Thank you for this one. We have one question coming from the audience as well. So why did you become an e-resident and start a company in Estonia?
Well, I'm going to use the worst swear word I know, which is Brexit. The B word replaced the C word as the worst swear word I know.
There's always a word.
Yeah. I couldn't believe we voted as a nation to commit economic suicide. And I was super depressed by that. And so I looked around for countries that might adopt me, and I found Estonia, and I became an e-resident. I came here for the first time to go to the bank. And all the way up to going to the bank, I wasn't sure if this was a joke and you were all going to like laugh at me and go, it fooled you. But I went to the bank, I got my e-resident card, I got my bank account, set my company up, and this represents hope. And it also represents for me, that commercially, the ability to keep trading with Europe. I can no longer do that from the UK. European agencies cannot buy from the UK company. They have to buy from my Estonian company. Insane. But you gain.
The final one. So it's the fifth business you're doing now. Generally speaking, what would be success for you in the end of the day?
This time round, a modest exit. A modest exit where I still own enough of the company for that to be meaningful would be great with me. You know, when I did company number 3, I was like, it's going to have to be a $100 million company or I'm not going to get out of bed. Like now it's like, you know, a year off before I do it all over again, and you know, an apartment that's slightly less horrible than the one I have would be great.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for your story. Round of applause, please, guys. Vicky Brock. Thank you.